It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I received an interesting email from my dear friend Mike Cohn, and the subject of this email caught me off guard. It was, are user stories and story points required in Agile? And the more I thought about that, at first I was like, well, of course they are. Don't be ridiculous. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, well, maybe not. Because I know some teams that don't use stories at all. So let's see where Mike takes this on this journey. He says, I'm often asked if user stories are part of Scrum. No, they are not. You can have a phenomenally successful team and never work with user stories at all. That's what I thought. So he and I are in line here, and I have a feeling I'm going to like the direction that this goes. It says at its core, Scrum is a very small set of rules. The Scrum rules are defined in the Scrum Guide, and they're things like keeping sprints short, no longer than a month. Outside this core set of rules are the generally accepted Scrum practices. These are good ideas every Scrum Master should be aware of, but that a team doesn't necessarily need to do. User stories kind of fit in that box. Okay, so let's pause here. So, one of the things that I teach is I teach something called the Agile Landscape. And I teach that while Scrum is a hub of all things good that happen in the Agile environment, it is more than a system. It is more of a framework. It is a way for teams and organizations to build around those core fundamentals of Scrum to achieve success. One of the things that I quickly point out is that successful Agile organizations focus on four phases of work. The first phase of work is initiation or ideation. This is where we're brainstorming, coming up with the right ideas that need to be done. The second phase is discovery or coming up with an MVP, validating our personas, making sure we're doing some mapping, ending up with some type of tangible document that's going to help us move forward, whether it's a mapping document or a short form document that tells us a proof of concept of what we're trying to do, or whether it's a working prototype or a walking skeleton of what we're trying to build. Either way, it's important for us to have that information, right? So the third phase is delivery, and that's the one that takes forever. That's the one where people, when you hear people say we're doing Agile, they're talking about delivery. This is everything from sprints to Scrum to estimation to story points to planning poker to, and when I call it delivery, I think this is what Mike's referring to here. Delivery is a phase that has everything. And that's where story points fall, and that's where all these other things fall as well. So he referred to them, quote, as accepted Scrum practices. I'm referring to them, quote, as accepted Agile practices, just because they fall in the Agile landscape, but not always in the realm of Scrum, which makes it kind of interesting. A great Scrum Master should know what a user story is. No kidding. They may think that stories are awful and not recommended, and they may not even recommend the team using them, but they should at least know what they are. I agree. And I'll go on the record right now and say that I'm team yes story. And even if we're doing Kanban, I like to have, tickets in the forms of stories and other things so that it just makes it easy to consume. For me, consumption is the key. Consumption and the ability to meet the key stakeholders' requirements. And I think stories make all that easier. Okay, let's switch gears. What about story points? Story points are another generally accepted Scrum practice that isn't officially part of Scrum. Once again, 150% true, right? It's not part of Scrum, but it's definitely something you should do if you're not doing it. Story points are a useful way for team members to agree on an estimate. Points get around a common problem. A senior team member thinks something will take a day, a junior team member thinks 2 days, and they're both right, depending on who does the task. I preach this probably harder than anything else when I'm teaching either Scrum Master or product owner courses. Anytime somebody says they're struggling with forecasting or with estimation, I tell them fall back on a t-shirt size. Don't even use a number, because when you use a number, people often want to tie a number back to number of hours, days, or weeks, or number of dollars, or number of people. If you just use a t-shirt size, it makes it so much easier. And that t-shirt size could be a dog size, dinosaur size, elevation at a mountain peak size. I even taught at the Baptist Theological Seminary once where they use books from the Bible sizes. It looks more like a Thessalonians than a Second Kings. Whatever it is you need to do, as long as you're not tying time to the estimate. Because as Mike pointed out, the second you tie time to the estimate, you're setting yourself up for failure, because different people have different tools, different skill sets, different levels of experience, different knowledge. And when you think about it that way, it makes a lot of sense that if individuals can finish things, and then it's not, and I want to make sure I'm clear, it's not necessarily even to do with their level of experience. Sometimes you have someone who is incredibly talented at one thing, and someone who just graduated college that's next sprint is incredibly talented at the thing you'll be working on next sprint. So it's just one of these things where you can't just isolate it and say, okay, this person is always going to give better estimates. So a point to this person is this many hours, but a point to this person is X number of hours, because that doesn't work either. Because there are times where the most junior person knows the most about it. I've seen that happen too. So story points certainly have a place, and I want to make sure I'm clear. Story points are great because they help you avoid pointless debates. They save time, they increase the chance that your estimates will be more accurate, and they're a recommended unit of estimating product backlog items. Now, even if teams use the t-shirt size or whatever metric they use, behind the scenes, I always tied that back to the Fibonacci sequence. And the reason I do that is because, well, Fibonacci number one, the Italian mathematician, was an expert when it came to forecasting and estimation and accuracy. So I feel like if you use that scale, it makes it easy to recover if you make a mistake, but it makes it transparent that if you use this form for estimation, that the expectation is you may make a mistake and say something is medium when it's really small, or something small when it's really medium, and it's okay. It's easy to recover if that happens. But if you're using like a doubling technique, for example, it makes it harder for you to recover that number of units or points if you have any common errors. So for me, I think story points are a great tool. I just tie them back to something that's non-numeric. And once you do that, that's great. But I love his call out here. He says, but Lee, not every team needs to estimate. And you certainly don't have to use story points if you estimate. You can use some other unit if you prefer. And that's what we're just now talking about. I do, however, think that you should give story points and user stories a try. For the majority of teams practicing Agile, they're both great practices and they will help you succeed. I cannot agree more. I really feel like if you can teach people the value behind story points, and if you can help them really understand how to leverage them, and I call it a low precision, high accuracy estimate, where you're not trying to be precise to the minute of how long it's going to take you, but you're using a very high level of accuracy. So it's low precision, high accuracy because you know exactly what sprint it's going to fall in, you know what work's going to be done, and you have clearly defined acceptance criteria that's going to get you there. It's just now you're going to end up in a position where you're able to better forecast, which is going to yield better results for executive leadership, which is going to make them happy, which is going to help everyone succeed with Agile. So that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.